And welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Going for Two, presented by Home Field Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I am joined here by my friend and colleague, Bryan Fischer. It's great to be back and great to be here podcasting with you in my actual chair instead of a suburban Atlanta hotel room.
I was going to say it looks a lot better in terms of the background there, but happy to have you back. I'm sure it was a very productive conference, and you more than anything, it sounds like you learned a lot from it. I think that was the bottom line that I took away from our conversations.
Yeah, I'll quickly talk about this, and then we can kind of put it to bed. I've addressed it in a few other episodes and newsletters and everything. This was a really informative educational conference. Part of it is just like, selfishly, this is a chance to see what my life would have been like had I gone to graduate school. I'm like, all right, these are who my friends would have been, and this would have been what our workplace drama would have been, and and here's how we're digging into everything. And it's kind of funny, as a reporter who's been like really in the weeds in this world, I can go into one of these, paper presentations that we're talking about NIL or conference realignment or some Byzantine thing with administration and realize, I think I actually know a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of that world, than this thing. Maybe I could have been a professor. But events like, and here's the research method slide, and here's like the theoretical framework, and here's the R values. I'm like, shit, no, I couldn't, because I don't know. I haven't taken a statistics class since 2009, and I think I got a C+ in it because I was making jokes about p-values instead of actually like learning how all the numbers actually worked. So asking very smart people to explain things to a dumb person was really useful. And I mean, there was a bunch of stuff there that I didn't know, particularly about esports. I think if I was a graduate student now, that would be, and trying to figure out where I should be going in sports management. If I wanted to kind of find like blue ocean data sets and stuff, though there wasn't a ton of literature that had been done for decades, I would encourage people to go there. I think So I went to hear 5 different papers presented, and I'm hoping, the way that this whole system works, right, is like the papers are presented one after another super quickly. So there wasn't really a ton of time for me to kind of go up there and interview everybody right afterwards. And then there's a whole mass of people in the hallway because it's not built for reporters. But, I reached out to a bunch of folks and send me your paper next week. Let's talk later. I'm going to try to do some follow-ups about some of those esports papers later on, but about facility construction, about sponsorships, about what happens when you add scholarships to university budgets and everything. Really interesting stuff for me as somebody who is still very interested in video games. That's been a through line hobby for me for 25 years, but still is new to this world. Like I'm not a capital G gamer. I am a get destroyed by middle schoolers when I play FIFA once a week kind of gamer. And I think that's probably all I'm ever going to be. I'm sorry. One second. Yes, Miles?
Can me and Penny go watch?
Go watch what?
TV.
No. I would prefer that you guys do things that are not screens, since you had screens for 45 minutes when you were here, so you could play cards or board games or go outside.
What about after we do that?
What time is it? 4:42. At like 5:15, like 30 minutes, then you can. Okay. And next time, don't come down unless it's an emergency, because I'm on TV right now. Okay. All right. Thanks, Miles. Sorry about that.
No worries.
One of Penny's friends is over, and okay.
We'll get a little juice on here on the podcast with some nice additional color, but
yeah.
And I completely forgot where we were going with this.
We were talking about esports and scholarships and research there. So this is, I filed a bunch of FOIAs about esports budgets, and it's one of those things where I feel like I keep telling myself, I'm going to really do a bunch more newsletters on this, but I have a gigantic list of those things. And then, as you know, stuff just keeps happening. But this is a space I want to learn more about, and this conference, I think, helped there.
I think it's a fascinating space, and just in general, that a lot of people in the sports industry are interested in, right?
Yeah.
Especially, a couple of years ago, I mean, there was a lot of talk about paying 6 figures for franchise fees for a lot of the esports franchises. Like you had NFL owners investing in it. And like, I do think it is a unique space for colleges. I mean, we started to already see a lot of people kind of ramp up their programs. A lot of it, really designed to kind of boost enrollment. And that's something that we've talked on this show quite a bit. But you're right, from a casual fan's perspective, I think the growth of the video game industry, there's probably not a great just like go-to resource. I think you kind of consume it in bits and pieces, but you put it out of your back of your mind. But everybody talks about Netflix. Everybody talks about these media rights. There's this massive other industry out there that nobody really talks about, and it Particularly so with EA Sports coming out with that new NCAA video game right down the road. I think it's going to kind of get back into the forefront for a lot of folks in the college athletics industry.
Yeah, I am very interested to see what happens with competitive esports and the college football game. There is a competitive esports scene for Madden. It's not as robust as some of the non-sports games or a sports games world. I don't actually know if more people play Madden or play NBA 2K. I would imagine more people play FIFA than both of them. And colleges don't typically really control a lot of the actual tournaments because those are publisher held. So I don't know exactly what EA wants to do with this specific world. It could certainly be a way to make both college football generally and this game and esports gaming become more accessible to new people. You're really right about, I think, that the first thing that you noted, like a lot of other people are interested in this space. And one of the things I kind of found just from high level conversations with folks here is you do have a lot of the money that's gone into American esports, as I understand it, is coming from like institutional sports investors, right? The kinds of people that own other sports teams because they feel like they know the sports business, they know event management, they buy into these leagues. Many of these people haven't like held a video game controller since like Space Invaders in arcades back in the late 70s. They really don't know the product very well. And what some of them have learned is that while there are many similarities between esports and, say, professional basketball, you're not going after exactly the same demographic. The finances and your revenue model are all different, right? Like, so there have been dudes that have invested money in this and then realized maybe I don't know his business as well as I thought. You have another group of people that jump, I think, are the kind of people that rush in anytime there's a brand new industry, whether that's crypto, whether that's name, image, and likeness consulting, whether that's some kind of other resource extraction, who are hustlers, right? And maybe don't understand things terribly well, or maybe don't have necessarily the best intentions, but have kind of flopped in because they saw there was a bubble. And then you have the practitioners. And some of those practitioners are not used to the world outside of the more provincial esports world, and there are challenges and there are opportunities, I think, with bringing that in. All of this then to loop into college, where not very many of the administrators who are running these programs, both at big schools like where you and I went, to small schools at places where we definitely didn't, they are often run by people that are not very familiar with computer games or video games, right? And some of that is because, like we've both talked about a lot, it's about enrollment. By God, I got to get another 100 men on this campus by hook or by crook, and this is cheaper than football. Sometimes it's led by DEI, because if you want to boost Asian male enrollment or international student enrollment, this can be a particularly effective. While I do think that universities, by and large, have figured out how to use esports programs to help with enrollment and with retention, I don't know if a lot of them have completely wrapped their arms around trying to use these as profit generating, or at least high revenue generating tools, or how to better equip their athletes to earn lots of money in sponsorships. It tends to be like, as I understand it right now, is you're doing that when you came into the program. That's wonderful, but this isn't necessarily a place that can launch you from A to B. We'll see if that continues. And my recommendation would be, if a school is considering doing this, or considering investing in it or making it a bigger priority, that they talk to their sports management department. And in fact, I just to kind of sum up my major takeaway from the newsletter on Monday, if you hadn't missed this, the single biggest thing that I really took away from this experience is, by and large, athletic departments and sports management departments don't do a good job of talking to each other. The people that are researching ticketing data and researching sports marketing and researching DEI and student retention and NIL and actually trying to apply academic rigor are not talking to the people that are actually running all of those industries. And the people who are in those industries are not always doing a good job of going down the street and campus and asking. And part of that is because of, I think, philosophical turf protections. Some of that is human nature, and some of that is the academics aren't really incentivized to do it, because here's the wild thing. And I had a reader who's a professor actually who tell me this, that he wrote like a guest post on Extra Points, and that was read by thousands more people that have ever read anything he's written in one of the journals, which are paywalled and only picked up by a couple of other grad students, and read by way more people in industry. And this is a kind of big newsletter. It's not the biggest newsletter, even in this particular niche, right? It is, it's in the middle. But orders of magnitude more read than the bi-quarterly, Journal of Sports Law, Bird Law, Boats, whatever. But this tenure board doesn't care about that. The tenure board just cares about these other, 6 paywall things. I don't know how to fix that, but it does seem to create a system where the people who have knowledge and the people who need the knowledge are not in sync, and that's less than ideal.
They're going deep on the road to higher ed problems, because this is not just specific to this industry, and I think that's important to keep in mind. These silos you speak of on campus, I mean, they are deep and they are entrenched, and they get further entrenched probably by the year in some cases, where truthfully there's not a whole lot in terms of really a need to kind of have that cross departmental conversation, just because of the everybody's so busy with focused on what they have to do kind of in front of them. And athletics is an entirely different beast from the normal kind of 9 to 5 that you're going to get in terms of your typical professors and deans and whatnot, who are kind of swimming in a whole different pool. Maybe in terms of kind of those major gifts in higher ed, there might be a little bit more conversation, so there's some coordination when you're kind of going after the same donors. But by and large, I mean, these are everybody's kind of busy with their kind of own neck of the woods, and never is that more clear when you're actually on campus talking with people surrounding college athletics, because outside of game days and worrying about parking and that sort of thing, there is not that crossover that you typically expect. But you're right about esports. I mean, I think it's going to be fascinating to see over the next really a couple of years, maybe even the decade and a half, how much of kind of a cottage industry in terms of colleges is going to spread up with. We've talked, I don't anticipate the NCAA stepping in or anything like that, but surely there's going to be some sort of consortium or something that kind of can make this a little bit more collaborative amongst colleges and universities, whether it's specific games like NCAA football, whether it's Overwatch, whether it's something like that. Like, you almost anticipate something popping up, and really helping facilitate a lot of these programs playing each other, making sure that it is a bit of a collegiate endeavor and not just these professional teams. And I think that's going to be fascinating to kind of track over the next couple of years.
Yeah, the biggest thing that is one of the biggest things that's very different about this world in college and like football or baseball, right, is even the college esports entities don't control the game. It's the game publisher that does. Like, the colleges that get together and play Overwatch can't get together and say, like, okay, like, this is the Overwatch build that we're going to use, and these are the rules, and this is when we're going to do it. No, that's the publisher of Overwatch that gets to make that decision. Whereas like college football is run and controlled by colleges. Colleges invented football, and they did that for most of the other sports. Different world. One that I hope to learn more. So I don't know if you know about this stuff. My email is matt@extrapointsmb.com. I would happy to talk. There's something else I want to talk to you about that's way more accessible, I think, than maybe some academic research. But before we get off track, let me just very quickly highlight our dear friends at Home Field Apparel, because those bastards have done it again. That Arizona drop is really good. It's really good. There's a Wildcat that is riding Go Cats in a lasso above his head, and he looks like the kind of guy that's going to try to sell you a monorail, or maybe mineral rights to some kind of copper mine or something. And I have never been to Tucson, and I really want to buy that shirt.
Oh, well, you got to get out to Tucson. It's a very interesting place, but you're right. They hit the Arizona collection out of the park. I mean, they've followed up a pretty good ASU collection. Like, I'm interested to see if there's going to be any bit of rivalry going on between the two home field brands dropping back-to-back weeks. And then we got Clemson coming up. So they're just reeling them off right now. So it's pretty impressive, but you're right. That Arizona collection, that was truly top notch, especially the Cactus logo stuff. That might be finding a home in my closet sometimes.
I know you just can't go wrong with animals doing stuff, and that's a color scheme that is very flexible. I mean, probably not going to win a whole lot of friends at home field for saying this, but like, I'm probably not going to buy anything Clemson, and in part because like orange and purple, if you don't have an affiliation with that school, it can be kind of tough, right? I mean, we'll see what they kind of dug out from the 1930s, and the fun thing about the old vintage mascots is that many of them look like they're drunk or coked out or unusually expressive, which is funny, right? The problem with Clemson's mascot, which is the internet has already kind of colloquially named 8-Ball the Tiger, is that like that's his default setting. So I don't know if we have to go back from the 30s and suddenly he looks very distinguished and well put together, or it's actually like a more modern mascot. Maybe that becomes funny. But the novelty with Clemson doesn't exist because that's the dude's default setting. You know, he looks like somebody took a Hobbs doll from Calvin and Hobbes and just like made it 6 feet tall and like taught it gymnastics. It's the same kind of production value. But I don't know if you're into that, Clemson, you can find that at Home Field Apparel. If you're into Arizona, if you're into a bunch of other stuff, they probably got that too. They have most Power 5 and most big mid-major brands on Home Field Apparel, finding stuff from the 1970s, 80s, 40s, 20s, all the weirdo logos that you've forgotten about. I'm wearing a Home Field shirt right now, as I typically am when I'm not at a serious professional function. I'm wearing the Boise State Bronco. We have another blue shirt here. We have the beautiful Fighting Green Wave, which is an important institution throughout college sports internet. If you haven't bought any Home Field stuff yet, one, you're a weirdo. Two, it's okay because we're a pro weirdo podcast. You can go save 15% off your first order by using promo code Extra Points at checkout. I would highly encourage you to do that to help support our sponsors and thus also support this show. Also, if you're an AD or somebody that controls a bunch of intellectual property, my email is matt@extrapointsmb.com. I'm happy to put you in touch with our friends at Home Field so we can get your stuff on there as well. In non-shilling for brands news and a non-academic high drama news and non-NIL news, non-conference realignment news, non-college sports in crisis, existential terror news, Bryan, I think you have something you wanted to talk about here today, right?
Yeah, the College Football Hall of Fame just released their 2023 ballot on Monday, and I'm excited because this is the good part of the job where we actually kind of go back and can look at some past careers, but some pretty big names. I believe you've heard of this Tebow fellow. Maybe you're familiar with his work, perhaps?
Tebow? Is it silent or something? No, these are always excellent exercises in guy remembering. Tim Tebow being we don't really have to remember that guy because we haven't forgotten about him. Have you ever been to the College Football Hall of Fame?
I have not. It is as many times as I've been through Atlanta and literally walked past it, but have not actually gone in. You know, it's funny because SEC Media Days is going to be there this year, so there's that opportunity as well down the road. But yeah, it's for as long as it's been around between the pandemic and everything, kind of shuttering it a little bit. That has not certainly helped my ability to visit it.
I used to. Yeah, I walked by it all the time when I lived in South Bend because that's where it used to be, next to the Studebaker Museum and then a bunch of empty office buildings near downtown. They moved it down there. I mean, I think we'll be around for the NIL Summit later, and that will be there. I'm excited to actually go. I've looked at some of the digital collections and everything, but I haven't had a chance to dig in. There are in this year's Hall of Fame class, and you would know more about the actual selection criteria, I think, than I would. We have a bunch of players, not just Power 5 players, but players throughout all of multiple levels of college football, and then coaches. And I maybe we can start with the coaches because I have to be honest. Looking through this list, there weren't a whole lot of people that I would consider to be in the rarefied elite of this sport. Where some of them were just very, very good, but maybe I'm being too cynical or too picky or something. Right? There's several names on here that I think people would remember. Mark Richt is on this list. Would you consider Mark Richt to be a historically elite college football coach from Georgia and Miami? I mean, he did this for 18 years, won a ton of football games. Did not really only came close to winning a national championship once. Was not really elite that often. An A+ human being. Would you put him in that list? Maybe being an A+ human being compared to college football coaches generally should give him a bigger leg up.
Yeah, I think that that might be on the minds of certainly some voters out there. But in terms of if you're saying is he the first ballot, one of the first names off the tip of your tongue? No, but I think he, given what he's done at Georgia and later Miami, he's been a pretty important part of the college football fabric. So I can definitely see him getting in. I think it is important to kind of take a step back and remember that there are some selection criteria in terms of winning percentage. That's why Howard Schnellenberger is not in there. And
woo, no,
incredibly that he's not in there. But there's a reason Larry Coker shows up on this list just from dating from his times at Miami and later UTSA. But I would definitely, even in this year's class, would probably put a few names ahead of him. But I think Mark Richt is certainly well deserving of these honors. He's obviously been a big part of Georgia fans, and while he didn't quite get over the hump in terms of national titles or kind of reaching Georgia's full potential, he did a lot of groundwork there in terms of keeping the program as one of the more consistent winners in the SEC. Got some conference titles in a very tough league, produced several All-Americans. Like you really can't kind of write the history of the SEC in kind of the 2000s without Mark Richt and those Georgia teams really coming so close to kind of getting over the hump and winning that national title. Probably more what he's known for, probably outside of Athens. But at the end of the day, Larry Blankney's name is on there out of Troy. I would kind of put him ahead there, given how he built that program up.
And Frank Solich, if you want to talk about people that built up programs.
Line,
If I had a vote, if I had to pick anybody on this list, no disrespect to Darryl Rogers, I think I'd probably go Solich, who not only won a gajillion football games at Nebraska, and has now become an almost meme given where the program is after that. But man, Ohio sucked. Like, and I'm saying this as somebody with like a 740 phone number still. Before he got there, they were good like for 1 or 2 years, and then that was kind of one of the real just dog jobs in all of FBS. You're kind of in the middle of nowhere. You're not that close to where any of the good football players are in Ohio. The campus is more known for basketball, journalism, and drinking. And not in that order than anything resembling football success. And he made them good every single year for 14 years, 15 years. Like in a conference where coaches, are changed as often as we change our socks. That feels very historically notable to me. But it is kind of hard, to grade what someone did at Troy or what someone did at Navy and what someone did at Georgia under an SEC contract. It is kind of a hard apples to apples comparison, right?
I mean, just a terrific job there at Ohio, as you mentioned. And really, I mean, all those gigs are so tough, especially dropping down the level. And everybody kind of thought, where is he going to go from here after getting fired from Nebraska? And I mean, just doing a great job in terms of elevating that program into a consistent winner, which is hard to do in the MAC. I mean, outside of NIU, there's really nobody that kind of has reached those levels on a consistent basis like he has. And the bottom line is, he's the winningest coach in MAC history. All the bowls that he was able to get to that program too, didn't quite get over the hump in terms of conference titles, which I know, is a bit of a sore subject there around Athens. But you add that with those Nebraska teams that, let's say, face it, made it to the BCS championship game, obviously had some terrific success in the Big 12, with a style of offense that certainly was by no means modern, but he was able to find success and produce some really consistent winning football. And I think he's certainly going to be one of the top of the names for a lot of people, just in terms of name recognition, but also for the accomplishments. And I think that is what's fun about the ballot is, you're only limited in terms of the number of spots that you got. So it's not like you can vote for all these coaches. There's a select number of spots when you end up getting them, and you get those choices that kind of you're like waffling in between. You're like, well, I'll get to them next year. Well, then there's kind of the new set of coaches that kind of come onto the ballot that are kind of push them down, and that's why some folks kind of languish a little bit. That's why there's some Heisman Trophy winners, some All-Americans that are still circulating around this ballot. But it's tough from the coaches to the up top to the players. I mean, there are a lot of key considerations that you have to have when you go in and actually vote for a lot of these names.
Yeah, let me ask you this. I guess on the player side here, when was the first year that you remember as a kid, like really remembering college football and having like vivid like attachments or memories of somebody actually playing? Like I'm a big college football history guy, right? But I was born in 1987. I don't really remember watching anybody in 1991. Like for me, I think it was the 1996 season. That was the first that I really remember. And really, there's not that many players prior to 2000 that I have strong like attachments to or memories of, because I wasn't watching 100 games a season, right? I was playing Sonic the Hedgehog and doing other things. When was that time for you?
Yeah, probably about. I mean, we're pretty much the same age, so pretty much like you said, that time period. I mean, maybe you mentioned '96. I mean, that was obviously a unique time period in terms of you having the Big 12 kind of coming into formation. You have certainly some consideration in terms of some new faces around the league, and where I was in Texas, just oh, it's not just Texas and Texas A&M. They're playing Missouri and they're playing Kansas State, which I think that's that comes in mind. I know Michael Bishop's on the ballot as well, the K-State quarterback who was just phenomenal, and really electric. I mean, we talk about those dual threat quarterbacks, but you kind of go back to guys like that. They just took it off to another level. I mean, Antoine Randall L's on this ballot as well. I mean, you talk about, I know everybody knows the pro career as the wide receiver, but go back and watch some of those highlights at IU. I mean, he was just phenomenal.
I'm so glad you mentioned both those guys, because I think Bishop and Randall L in particular are unique to me, not because of what they did in like on Sports Reference or like counting stats or anything. I'm sure they were wonderful, but to me, as for someone to have the distinction of being a Hall of Famer, not only would you need to be successful on the field and be statistically significant, but I think you'd also want that be associated with some kind of holy shit moment, right? Where you so clearly what you're doing is so like a standard deviation above what everybody else is. Maybe you become historically significant in how you define the position, or that there were moments like as you were watching, they're like, this is a special person. Like the Indiana football teams when Antoine Randall was playing mostly sucked. Indiana football, by and large, outside of when we were like 2, has mostly not been very good. But I distinctly remember watching a lot of those games and thinking, there's 9 dudes here who are going to be future dentists, and this guy is terrifying and amazing and is eviscerating some really good Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State teams like by himself. I'd never seen anybody like Michael Bishop before. Like there weren't a lot of guys like Michael Bishop in 1998. And I would vote for both of those players, even if I know there are other people on here that are statistically better or maybe more historically significant. But just in terms of like when watching them, compared to their peers at that time and what that meant for people, watching them and then would go on to play a decade later, they were both amazing. It would do redefining, I think, what we thought might have been possible as quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think from the quarterback position, I think Reggie Bush obviously garners a lot of attention at the running back position. I think that was the one that always caught my eye in terms of just the explosiveness out of cuts. I think especially when you get those triple option guys and just when they make that one initial cut and then they're off. And I think you can apply that to the running backs. I think Reggie certainly top of mind. You got Kajana Carter on this, LaMichael James, who maybe a more recent vintage from those Oregon teams, but I mean, so fun to watch. And I mean, you just go down the list and it's like, kind of reminiscing throughout your college football memories.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of also
guy remembering. It's one of the, it's cheaper than therapy, folks. Like just sit back here and remember some guys. It's great.
And also a lot of like, how is this guy not actually already in the College Football Hall of Fame? There's so much of that too. Even getting past the kind of new inductees that are kind of coming onto the ballot, your Tim Tebow's, your Eric Weddles, your Alex Smith or whatever, that had great careers. But I just mentioned Reggie Bush, but like there you go down the names, Kajana Carter, Mark Carrier. Like how is Mark Carrier not already in the Hall of Fame? Like you talk about one of the best defensive backs coming out of USC, a program that's produced quite a few of them. I mean, picked off a ton of passes, obviously tremendous success in the NFL as well. Like there's just a bunch of guys on this list that you go back really to the 80s. I mean, Tim Couch, for years, really for decades before Mark Stoops arrived there in Lexington, Tim Couch was the only like highlight in terms of Wildcats football play. And I mean, as a recovering Browns fan, I'm sure you're also aware of this.
I do not need a lot of help to remember Tim Couch, but I mean, what he did in college was great, right? Air raid principles, ahead of his time, gigantic arm. His is an interesting case because like I feel like I have seen other guys like Tim Couch before. It's certainly since, right? Like in terms of like of how he played and how he put up his numbers and his body type and everything. I wouldn't say that was necessarily breaking a mold, but was really, really good and very important for Kentucky history. Like as I look through here, like Reggie Bush and Tim Tebow, I think are both great examples. People like I would consider to be probably first ballot college football Hall of Famers, not football Hall of Famers, but in terms of redefining the position, like every single time Reggie Bush was playing, that was appointment television. I didn't like USC then, and USC often played games when I was sleeping or doing other things, and you had to watch because He could have put up 250 all-purpose yards, and it might have been receiving or kick returning or running between the tackles. And it was going to, and we didn't. YouTube was kind of in its infancy, or highlight sharing was, so like you had to see it. Tebow was that way. I feel like Peter Warrick was that way.
Yeah. That was the one name that also caught my eye. I was like, how is this guy not already in, right? And he's been on the ballot for a while. So it's like,
definitely broke my heart as a fan in many ways, not just because he single-handedly turned Ohio State into dust, I think, in a Sugar Bowl, but then he was one of many Bengals that where things didn't work out. But man, he was fun to watch at Florida State. I don't know if I have super strong. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of really freaking Julius Peppers is on here, right? Like that. I mean, and Simeon Rice were both just outstanding college football players in many ways. How many people are going to get voted in? It's not that many, right?
No, they kind of give you a list and they narrow it down, and so there's only a certain number of spots, which is why this list kind of keeps growing with names you tend to remember. But it is just wild. I mean, Marshawn Lynch is in there. You mentioned Julius Peppers. I mean, you can kind of go back to him. Talk about the rare, just absolute specimen of an athlete who could play major college football and dominate, play major college basketball and contribute for one of the best, a historic powerhouse at North Carolina there. And then he goes into the NFL and has one of the most productive careers, you can imagine. You talk about somebody that obviously deserves to kind of get this consideration, and it's fun to kind of go down the list and see other names. I mean, Chris McIntosh, the Wisconsin offensive line, now he's the AD there, in Madison.
Oh, yeah.
He was so good, in terms of you see him coming off the edge with those big time Wisconsin teams, and Ron Dane coming downhill. I mean, it was just it's wild to see.
They kill people.
Yeah, just roll right over them, right? And I think that is the kind of fun part of this list, is just seeing the names and then kind of thinking back to those memories. Marshawn driving the cart around, the gift that you've seen all the time.
Yeah. What I'm going to do, if you are not watching this for video, which is fine, right? Like I'm ugly. If you want to listen to this on your podcast device, that's totally fine. I'm going to add a couple of highlight clips in the show notes when I put this on Extra Points, so we can all remember some guys together. It's one thing for me to sit there and describe Garrison Hurst or describe LaMichael James or talk about Ryan Leaf. It's another thing to see Ryan Leaf throw the ball over some mountains. Ryan Leaf took Wazoo to a Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
That happened. People were like, this dude's better than Peyton Manning. And that wasn't a crazy thing to say, because of how good he was. If you weren't old enough to remember it, you should go back on the internet and remind yourself.
That was the best part of staying up on those late Saturdays. You get the fuzzy Fox Sports broadcast of some Wazoo game and them throwing around the yard like that. That truly does kind of take you back. I mean,
I can picture the font right now, the one that was like quasi graffiti, and scribbled a little bit. Yeah.
And I guess just because you're less kind of invested in the system like you are now, there's just less connection because there's no kind of internet around, and you're able to kind of get a grasp of what Pullman is. But Pullman might as well have been a different country, and kind of thinking about where it was located, and then you ended up, every Saturday, just kind of seeing the stands being filled and them throwing around the yard. It was definitely a unique experience watching college football back in the day. And I mean, just again, you go through this list and you're just you just remember some of those plays, so vividly. I mean, Kellen, it's weird too, because Kellen Moore is on this list, the Boise State quarterback, one of the winningest quarterbacks of all time. It's I covered his last game in the Las Vegas Bowl. It's I remember watching his entire career, and it does kind of say that we are getting a little bit older, that as we age, and a lot of these guys, you can remember some of them as recruits, and you kind of go down the line, and I'm sure it's even more so for people even older than us.
Yeah, you started your career in sports media much earlier than I did. I kind of messed around and did some other stuff at the beginning, so I don't think I covered anybody here, but I definitely remember watching them, and that is going to happen soon, right? I mean, we're already talking to some of these guys are administrators or coaches, but we already see people who we watched whose kids are now playing. Yeah, that is an inevitable. Death will come for us all. We are all deteriorating sacks of meat. Enjoy Arby's and enjoy Washington State football. Now that I think about it, I don't think I learned where Pullman was until I might have been a freshman in college. It wasn't that I wasn't aware there was a school, and like I knew that I had to stay up late to watch it. I'd seen them play, and like, I recognized the logo and everything, but I think I would have just assumed everything in Washington was Seattle until I met people from Idaho, and like, actually, no, what was it was like down the street. Who knows?
And because you didn't like get the consistent like info about a lot of these things, you weren't kind of thinking about like, where it was. You just thought like, oh, this Pullman place, it seems like awesome. A bunch of people are in the stands. They're going crazy for, going to the Rose Bowl, and you see them out there in red on January 1st. You're like, oh, that might be pretty interesting. And then you kind of learn that the place itself is a little bit smaller than you would.
It's still interesting. A lot of wonderful things to say about Pullman. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, maybe not what we had necessarily anticipated. You want to know what's really depressing? One way, honest to God, that I think I learned about some of these things was from playing the NCAA video game. NCAA 2000, I don't know, like 6 or whatever. And you can tell because they didn't totally render all of the stadiums, but you knew, is this an urban campus? Is this forest campus? Is this suburb campus? Right? And you can kind of tell what it was supposed to be. And that's how you kind of knew, like, okay, Georgia Tech is in Atlanta, and this school is in Boonies, Georgia. And like, it is kind of wild to think about it there, because I mean, we're not that old, but I grew up, we didn't get cable until I was a sophomore. We didn't get high-speed internet until I was a senior, and your ability to just have infinite information about everything was substantially diminished, and you really would learn about things from PlayStation 2. Or from late night Fox.
I mean, how many fight songs did you just end up knowing kind of by the back of your hand because of what, and being the NCAA video game? Like
that is a truly depressing thought. Like, it's circulating in my brain. Like, do I remember things I learned at my undergraduate education? Do I remember my nieces and nephews' birthdays? And then in my brain, it's just like the monkey from The Simpsons with the cymbals. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, because those are the things that don't leave. I have become uniquely brain poisoned. Thank you, Electronic Arts and the Collegiate Licensing Company, for breaking my brain.
Yeah, I mean, just the exposure. Like, I always think going back, like I learned, places in Texas by like the high school success of their football teams, which is a very Texas thing to do. You're from so and so. Oh, did you play? Were you on the East team or the West? Like that. Yeah. That's how I understood geography in the state of Texas, based on their football teams. And I feel like the same in college, just based on that NCAA video game. It's like I understand all the MAC schools, right? It's like, okay, I know divisional structures now because of that old NCAA game. It's not just those fight songs or the stadiums, but it's a bit of everything out there as well.
Let me just close on that with this, because and now that we're getting a little bit closer to the release date, and people, I've seen my work aggregated and then like re-aggregated, and sometimes
you're a TikTok star now.
Excuse me, I'm a reputable source.
Oh yes.
No. So I think I'm going to write something probably next week. That's just like, here's a central place of literally everything that I know. If you are listening to this podcast, let me just reiterate with this: there is literally nothing so minute, so inside baseball, that touches this video game project that fans would not care about. If you are an AD and you're like, hey, you know what I would really love now that the season's over and everyone's kind of on vacation, and I would love 18 hours of uniformly positive news about my program, call me up and tell me about the rendering of your stadium logo or of your stadium, or putting the players' logos in there. Talk to me about what this means for your coaches, anything about like that tiny process. And I've sent these text messages all the time. People will eat it up. There is nothing that I can write, even conference realignment stories, that is as people want to read more, that do not work in this industry, than anything about this video game. So if people do not leak me some more things, and I don't hear anything back from publishers or anything else, I'll probably do that. And maybe not this week, but early next week, so we can all be in one standardized place, because I know that it wasn't just us that were socialized and brought into the sport through that game.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bit of Madden fatigue. So like everybody's like, oh, let's go hang on to every little morsel that we can get out of the NCAA video game, because the demand is going to be off the charts. Not only is like the ecosystem of ability to play this game going to be larger than it was when it went away, but like the amount of college football fans that want to have that next generation kind of grow up on this game and get interested in seeing NCAA football, like I think it's as good as any, and it's coming back at a good time too. I think it's going to be unique. I wonder if there's going to be a NIL manager in the game or something like that. We'll see, but it's going to be certainly well received by pretty much every fan base out there, that's for sure.
At least for the first 6 months, right? Like I know that the internet has a very conflicted relationship with Madden, and part of that I've learned is just because like video game fans who just complain, man. Almost nobody is happy in video game world. That's just how gamers be sometimes. But also, I wouldn't say that Madden 19 and Madden 22 are enormously different products, and sometimes the AI has. I mean, yeah, and the ultimate team is a big part of the system, and like I understand why people don't like EA. I get it. I have EA games, and I have opinions about EA games too that are probably similar to yours, but they just want to play the game, man. And then, this is the time of year too, and like people who are into sports games have been playing their old sports game for 10 months, and they're ready to not play that sports game or change something else, right? Like I think I finally stopped playing NBA 2K, and probably won't pick it up again until the next game comes out. When I say I'm not playing it this year, I'm tired. I know, like I'm a grown man. I'm turning the page, and then it comes out, and I want to play it. But I think we can get you out of there on that. We have a couple other things that we're digging into. For extra points, I have a story that you might have missed, that where I interviewed some of the folks that are trying to start a college football players association. That is, it's not a union, but we talked about what that actually looks like and what it may be able to do, what it may not be able to do. I'm talking to the folks that are running an NIL collective for Bradley, which is not Ohio State or Boston College or Texas or Alabama or anything, and what that world looks like at that level. I hope to be able to share some more papers as people get back to me. And I'll also say this, because this is the other thing that people keep texting me about. I do not have any new information right now about what Incarnate Word is going to do vis-a-vis the Southland or the WAC, nor do I have any new information about what Howard will do vis-a-vis the Colonial Athletic Conference. There should be resolutions on both of those stories happening in the next 2 weeks. I don't anticipate other realignment news happening because people are on vacation. People are prepping for their mid-major conference meetings, which haven't completely happened. This should be slow. I promise all of you, as soon as I hear something, or somebody calls me back, or somebody else breaks the story, I promise I will share it all with you. I am not hiding this to sell subscriptions. So we'll see. We'll see when all that happens. You can find all of that at extrapointsmb.com. Did I forget to plug anything? I think I did, didn't I?
Just, if you have a podcast platform that allows you to rate, review, and subscribe, make sure you not only subscribe to this here podcast and going for 2, but also give us 5 stars, because that really does help others kind of find this podcast, and I think really gives some additional insight into college athletics that they're probably not getting anywhere else.
That's right, folks. Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. Help spread the word. If you don't have any money, but you still like Extra Points, you still like the podcast, just tell your friends about it. Throw it on Reddit, throw it in your message board, throw it in your colleagues' group chat. Tell your boss or your dean or your AD or somebody to buy a bunch of subscriptions, or share it. That helps keep all of this going. In the meantime, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll catch up with you in a couple of days. See you on the internet.